They'll stay as long as they're needed.
A Channel 2 News team accompanied the relief flights to El Salvador, and in this coming week, they will be filing reports on the situation there.
Finally come to El Salvador. Last night, 2 plane loads of aid from California touched down within minutes of each other. The Salvation Army brought 5 doctors, 5,000 pounds of medical supplies, and more than 24 disaster relief specialists.
These people have very little right now, and I think anything we can give to them or help make them make it a little easier would be a contribution.
With the aid of Salvadoran soldiers, the Salvation Army headed straight for one of the hardest hit areas of the capital, a neighborhood called Colonia Paraíso. There, families sent into the darkened streets by the earthquake watched wide-eyed while the troops strung out lights and erected a forest of tent poles. The medical teams are now expecting an onslaught of needy and hurting people. In El Salvador, Peggy...
Hence, they're afraid to go near any standing buildings for fear of more aftershocks. Relief agencies continue to provide supplies and medical care, but it is clear that it will take the country months, perhaps years, to recover. Cleanup crews discovered more bodies late yesterday, but rescue workers have now given up any hope of finding more survivors inside collapsed buildings. Of course, there have been a lot of survivors there, some of them with some dramatic stories that are coming to us from relief agencies who've been working at the scene. This little girl was in her mother's arms, waiting in line with other injured, when doctors working with the Salvation Army spotted her. 2nd and 3rd degree burns over a quarter of her body. Burns she got when the quake hit and a pot of boiling soup fell on her.
So they brought them into the tent to get them out of the noonday sun, and it was hot. It was very hot. They then treated her immediately with the ointment and some of the bandages, tried to do a diagnosis.
This little girl is being treated by doctors from Southern California, flown to San Salvador by the Salvation Army. But while there may be doctors in temporary medical facilities, according to Major Van Cleef, who just returned from San Salvador last night, there is still a critical need for medical supplies, especially supplies to treat the many burn victims.
There wasn't even a decent skin grafting machine available. And we hope that something can be done in working that out so that we can put it in the hands of the local hospital, and then our doctors can continue to work with their doctors.
Temporary building materials, disinfectants, and power tools are stacking up in Salvation Army offices. There is not enough cargo space aboard planes to get it where it's needed the most. And still the phone calling continues for urgently needed medical supplies.
And there are some supplies that we are desperate to get our hands on, and we're wondering if you can be any assistance at all.
Now, if you can donate any medical supplies or you want to be part of the next Salvation Army medical team leaving next week, call this number. It's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night. It is 213-627-5571. In addition to medical supplies, they need 1 plastic surgeon, 1 pediatrician, and several nurses as well.
People with skills required.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
She's got about a 25% of her body burned, mostly 2nd degree, about 2 to 3% 3rd degree. And so we've been doing daily dressing changes.
The Salvadoran earthquake. Almost 2 weeks have passed, but the thousands of shuddering aftershocks, the dust of falling concrete, and the wails of children in pain make it all seem like one never-ending moment. The poor people of El Salvador patiently, even stoically, wait in long lines for jugs of water, wait for a few tortillas and beans, and wait to unload the sheets of tin that will be the new roofs over their heads. And now the controversy over the emergency aid swirls like the dust in the streets.
We are in a war, you know, and the government is always worried that this help could get to the fighting areas in the countryside.
The Roman Catholic Archdiocese of El Salvador is running its own relief effort. Donations of food and medicine from churches around the world are distributed through its parishes. Critics who work with the church charge that millions of dollars in U.S. aid that is going to the government will end up not here in the shantytowns, but lining the pockets of officials.
We walked directly into the barrios, and then we went and found the people in their homes or where their homes were. And we were really dismayed to discover that the people felt they weren't getting the aid they needed, and that the help coming from the government was simply food aid, and that it was very minimal. That was some people, and then other people said the aid is not even getting to them at all.
But no matter who distributes the aid, it's hard to imagine that there will ever be enough to help the tens of thousands of people who who will continue to live like this. Peggy Holter, Channel 2 News, in San Salvador.
If you're interested in helping out quake victims in San Salvador, the Salvation Army will tell you what is needed. You can contact the Salvation Army at 213-627-5571. That number again, 213-627-5571.
Doctors and nurses are helping out. The Channel 2 News crew just spent 5 days in El Salvador, and Peggy Holter reports now on the volunteer efforts.
This young soldier dislocated his shoulder trying to clear away rubble left by the earthquake. Doctors here at the Salvation Army Medical Aid Mission have no time to let the morphine take full effect. They pop it back and wrap it up, and the next patient, a woman who has smashed her foot, is helped in.
You know, see, there's no ice for her or anything like that to put on her. I had to give her a set of crutches, so nobody crutches.
The line outside the tent gets longer every day. Hundreds of the poorest of the poor of El Salvador are being treated here, most of them victims of their poverty as much as the earthquake.
The kids are having bronchitis and diarrhea as a primary problem. The diarrhea just because of the contaminated water probably, and the bronchitis from inhaling so much dust. I've seen a lot of women with musculoskeletal problems where they had to dig their kids out from underneath rubble.
Dr. Joseph Fox is an obstetrician, but here no one is a specialist.
I haven't treated any newborn diarrhea or infant diarrhea the whole time I was in practice. And of course a good part of my practice was surgery and office gynecology, which you can't do office gynecology in here at a table I wouldn't dare lay down on.
He retired 2 years ago from a practice at Huntington Memorial Hospital. The dusty, abandoned hut he's using as an exam room is a far cry from Huntington's modern facilities, but the spirit is here.
I think what's more important than even what we're doing medical-wise for these people is the psychological. Just the touching and the caring and what have you is just very important.
Lynn Cahill is an intensive care nurse at Daniel Freeman Hospital.
It's just amazing to see how well they tolerate these conditions.
The Salvation Army's medical relief mission here cuts right at the heart of the poverty and disease of this crushed neighborhood. But it's a double-edged sword, because along with the satisfaction of knowing they're helping comes the frustration of knowing they can never do enough. The frustration comes through when you talk to Kevin Earhart.
Scoliosis, spine's curved from birth, and they were given a brace at the hospital where he wears all the time, and now the brace has been buried in the earthquake. They want a new brace, but I can't give him a new brace because I don't know what the x-rays look like. Hospital.
Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
On the 5th day, members of the Salvation Army team take a moment to minister to themselves, to ask for the spiritual strength to go on.
I hear the rolling thunder, thy heart throughout the universe display.
With the Salvation Army in El Salvador.